of the Mississippi is the heartland of a huge continent. Here on the great Midwestern plain grows much of the grain of the United States. Here are some of America's great cities, river cities, farm markets, and wholesale centers. Here is vast mineral wealth, which has helped build the industrial might of the nation. Here is the port city of New Orleans, which brings the entire world within the reach of every river hamlet. For it is here that the Mississippi River, which the Indians call the Big River, flows into the Gulf of Mexico. This is the area of the Louisiana Purchase, bought from France in 1803 in one of America's greatest diplomatic achievements. Today, this area is a network of cities and roads, farms and industries. But at the time of its purchase, it was an unknown wilderness only recently ceded to France by Spain, which still held control of the area. Its eastern boundary was the Mississippi River, the major highway in this vast frontier country. Along the Mississippi's eastern tributaries, the Tennessee and Kentucky and Ohio rivers, lived thousands of hardy frontiersmen. They were cut off from eastern United States by the Appalachian Mountains, whose rugged trails were almost impassable to freight wagons. To sell their produce, they depended on the rivers, and especially the Mississippi with its great port of New Orleans. In New Orleans, their produce was loaded onto ocean-going vessels bound for eastern cities of the United States, like New York and Boston, and for the ports of Europe. These frontiersmen built rafts, which they called flatboats, to float their produce down the river. In 1802, some 500 flatboats loaded with flour, cotton, pork, whiskey, tobacco, corn, and furs made the trip to New Orleans. The value of the produce shipped down the Mississippi that year was more than $1.5 million, and this trade was essential to the continued existence of the West. These goods would be landed on the wharves of New Orleans, duty-free by a special treaty with Spain, to await an ocean-going vessel which would carry them to their markets. This was called the right of deposit. But in October 1802, the Spanish government exploded a bombshell. The right of deposit in New Orleans was suddenly withdrawn.
What do you mean, Siesta? I've got to see him. It's important.
Excellency, he forced his way.
Oh, quite right, Captain. We wish no incident. Incident? What do you call that notice?
But, my friend, it's the governor's order.
I brought a load down last year and unloaded it. Why can't I unload now? There may not be a ship to Boston for weeks.
Our treaty with your country has expired. The right of deposit no longer exists.
Look, there's a whole year's work out there for 6 families.
I'm sorry, my friend, but the right of deposit has been withdrawn.
The news from New Orleans spread an immense wave of indignation through every quarter of the United States, especially in the West. Some blamed Spain. Others looked beyond and saw a French hand in the background. In addition, the Federalist Party, defeated in the last election, seized on this incident to make political capital. Inflammatory articles and pamphlets fired the people's wrath, and there was much talk of war. In Congress, Senator Ross of Pennsylvania introduced a motion
that the Army be authorized to seize a part of Louisiana and thus force the free use of the Mississippi River by the American citizens.
In the White House, President Jefferson summoned his cabinet to consider the emergency.
I think we should stand outside this whirlwind until the fury spends itself.
But, Mr. President, the Federalist war dogs bay at our heels.
There's talk the Western territories may secede.
Time is in our favor, Mr. Madison. First, we have to quiet the public clamor.
But how? Congress debates an invasion of Louisiana, and we with an army of 3,000 men.
We must see to it that a milder resolution takes the place of Senator Ross's.
But, Mr. President, how can we wait? With a French army of 14,000 at our back door, it is but a step from the island of Santo Domingo to New Orleans.
The day the French take New Orleans, we must marry ourselves to the British fleet and nation. And Napoleon knows it.
But he will not wish to push us into their arms.
Gentlemen, what if we offered to buy New Orleans?
Will the French entertain so desperate a proposition?
Who can tell? At least it will give us time to quiet the tumult at home.
Have we the power under the Constitution to make such an offer?
If it succeeds, the states will quickly ratify an amendment. For New Orleans, under the American flag, will unstop the Mississippi for all time.
Jefferson's bold proposal caught the fancy of Congress and the people. Congress voted $2 million for foreign expenses with an eye to the purchase of New Orleans and West Florida. To carry forward these negotiations, Jefferson appointed a man in the West, James Monroe, as special minister to both France and Spain.
If Napoleon refuses to sell the city, bid for a site for a town we can construct. Failing that, attempt to obtain a permanent right of deposit. If not New Orleans, perhaps elsewhere.
What if Napoleon refused all?
He must not. But if so, be prepared to cross the channel.
The British will support whatever the French oppose.
You will work jointly with our minister in Paris, for he is a man of broad experience and great sagacity.
My regard for Mr. Livingston is of the highest.
Mr. Monroe, I do not exaggerate when I say that upon the event of this mission may depend the future destinies of this republic.
Monroe sailing in March of 1803 stilled the public clamor, especially in the West. It was followed by another triumph for Jefferson's policy of moderation. In April, the Spanish minister in Washington informed Secretary of State Madison that His Catholic Majesty had restored the right of deposit. Victory had been won. But events were now moving swiftly toward a larger end, as Monroe learned upon his arrival in Paris on April 12th.
Mr. Monroe, I am delighted that you are come.
Your aide tells me that you have important news, Mr. Livingston.
It is a most surprising turn. As you know, my instructions have been to press for our purchase of New Orleans.
I hope you've met with some success.
I thought not until yesterday. But yesterday, Talleyrand chanced to ask me with great casualness, and yet I'm sure he was not casual, what the United States might offer for all of Louisiana.
All?
I told him we had no wish for it. It is but wilderness.
Our interest is New Orleans and West Florida.
He pressed me for a price. I spoke a low one of 2 million francs.
And what did he say?
He said too low. Reflect and let him know. All of Louisiana, with New Orleans too.
Is Talleyrand to be trusted? Perhaps he plays a game of his own.
Monroe, I am as sure as I am of our presence on earth that he speaks officially as foreign minister and upon orders of Bonaparte himself.
Talleyrand did indeed speak for Napoleon.
I say sell. Sell! I am sick of the very name. Sell it all if they are fools enough to buy.
I flatter myself the Chambers will not approve it.
Ha! You flatter yourself. My dear brother Lucian, you make yourself ridiculous, acting like a proud parent to this Spanish treaty you concocted.
Let me remind the Council that the Treaty of San Ildefonso expressly assures Spain that France will never alienate Louisiana to another nation.
What of the Constitution of the 18th Brumaire? Only by vote of the Chambers can French land be disposed of.
The Constitution. It is the Constitution of fools.
You go too far, Napoleon. Although I am your brother, I will myself lead the opposition against you.
Tell me, Talleyrand. My boy, did ever a man have two more ungrateful brothers?
Citizen Council, you took the oath of the Constitution from my very hand as president of the Council of 500. Seeing you despise it thus, were I not your brother, I would be your enemy.
My enemy? You, my enemy? I would crush you like this bat.
Gentlemen, surely Louisiana is not of such great importance as to come between the Bonapartes.
I say only this to the First Council. No true Frenchman will ever forgive the sale of Louisiana.
Do you want me to tell you the truth? How can we hold the wretched land? a handful left of the 14,000 I sent to put down the slave uprising in Santo Domingo. I tell you, the New World is nothing but a bottomless hole in which to pour money and men.
It is the hope of a new France. What say you, Citizen Marbois?
The Americans are so wroth with the Spanish that they would take New Orleans by force. And what's more, our clinging to this worthless land may drive the United States into the tender arms of the British. Is it worth the risk?
We must keep our eyes on Europe. We must have Malta, though we must fight the British to get it.
A British war needs money, Citizen Lucien. And I am Minister of Finance without finances. I think these Americans will pay dearly for Louisiana.
So you see, my brothers, in our republic, even family ties must bow to the will of the majority. Citizen Marbois, you are authorized to go on with this Louisiana side.
And so Marbois and sometimes Talleyrand met with the American representatives during the next 3 weeks. After some haggling over the price, an agreement was reached. On May 2nd, 1803, the treaty and convention was signed, antedated April 30th. America was to pay France a total of 80 million francs, 15 million American dollars in all. News of the Louisiana Purchase was hailed with joy by all but the most die-hard Federalists. But to Jefferson, it posed a theoretical problem of deep concern.
Gentlemen, important as it is to make Louisiana a part of the United States, it must be done by constitutional means.
Mr. President, I see no need for this proposed amendment you have written. An act of Congress will suffice.
But nothing in the Constitution gives the Congress power to add new territory.
Surely the Constitution does not intend to limit Congress.
Gentlemen, the peculiar security of this nation is in its possession of a written Constitution. Let us not make of it a blank paper by broad construction of its well-worded phrases.
I agree that the precedent is alarming, but the case is exceptional.
A long debate on constitutionality will only give the Federalists a stick to flog us with.
And who can tell when Napoleon may have a sudden change of heart?
We have all fought to keep the power of the federal government within bounds. The principle of strict construction has been the breath of my political life. I fear this treaty will give it a fatal blow. Very well, then. I acquiesce. I place my faith in the good sense of our country to correct the evil of construction, should it produce ill effects.
The purchase of the Louisiana Territory was ratified by a special session of Congress on October 20th, 1803, with token opposition mostly from New England Federalists. The debate established for all time the power of the President and the Congress to annex territory. On December 20th, 1803, the French tricolor was lowered and the United States took possession of the territory from France, which had taken over from Spain only 20 days before, just long enough to establish the Code of Napoleon, still today the basis of Louisiana state law. Acting for the United States was the youthful governor, William C. Claiborne of the Mississippi Territory, who shortly afterwards became governor of the Louisiana Territory. This simple ceremony brought under the American flag territory from which 13 new states would be carved. The states of Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Oklahoma. Thus, the Louisiana Purchase cleared the way for the western expansion of the United States and for its future greatness as a world power.